this happens whenever I talk like to Israelis. It always becomes like, oh, let's deal with this like abstract philosophy seminar versus actually dealing with the actions which are very real, which are happening, and which, if we actually discuss, they're pretty ugly. And so instead of talking about how Israel maintains a permanent occupation of the West Bank, we talk about oh what if Israel is attacked? What if
But
Israel
Israel, but
suffers
for the second time in this conversation,
security to give people
for,
their rights?
for the second time in the
Right.
conversation, I said, let's imagine I'm wrong. Would I agree with you? I said, yes. Let's imagine you're wrong. Would you agree with me? You say, I'm not wrong.
All right, Aaron Weiser and Doron Shafrir, thanks so much for connecting with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
So today I want to discuss Israel and the conflicts that Israel is currently engaged in. Some people are adamantly pro-Israel and believe that Israel is doing everything they can to defend themselves against the genocidal group of Hamas and Hezbollah. And other people think that it's Israel who's propagating a genocide in Gaza right now. And so one of my intentions for today's call is to understand these two viewpoints and to understand what is at the crux driving each viewpoint. And tell me about what you think has been going on in Gaza these last 11 months, 12 months, actually.
I think if you want to understand what's happened in the last year, you need to start before. After 2005, Israel withdraws to the border of Gaza, maintains a blockade around it. So basically, where it's very difficult for anything to enter or anyone to leave. And the strategy for the last 15 years was called mowing the grass. Israel would periodically assault Gaza, invade, or just from the air.
Doran, do you agree? Specifically, these points about enforcing a blockade to intentionally restrict Gazans in this way, mowing the grass, as
I don't
Aaron
think that's
said.
what he said. I don't think he said the blockade was to intention. Right? Am I correct, Aaron?
Sure.
This is not what you said.
The blockade had two purposes. The first one was what was the stated purpose was to prevent Hamas from receiving materials. No, but the other one was the blockade was instituted fully immediately after the election in 2006, when Hamas was elected to power. The Palestinians voted the wrong way. They didn't elect Fatah. They didn't agree to the Oslo Accords, the Oslo framework, which basically has governed the occupation for the last 30 years. They didn't agree to it. And so there was a blockade implemented, and while it did prevent like weapons and missiles, it also prevented things like chocolate, cookies, chips, just very civilian items that even medicine had a hard time getting through. So an Israeli advisor basically said, we needed to put the Palestinians on a diet, right? We can't have them. We don't want them to starve and all die, but we want to keep their quality of life at a certain low enough level that they decide they want to rise up and remove Hamas. That was always a stated goal. And it was also the goal of the periodic mowings of the lawn, where they would go in, and you can read, if you want to have a good sense of what these operations are like, you can read the Breaking the Silence reports, where and they're not written by Israeli soldiers who are expressing contrition. They're just telling them what happened, where they'd go in and they would just destroy blocks. Like in Operation Cast Lead, they destroyed 18,000 homes in an operation where 6 IDF soldiers were killed. And 1,500 people. So they just destroy a bunch of Gaza, and the goal is get the Palestinians to remove Hamas.
And let me just kind of try to package a bunch of that, Doran, and have you respond to it. So one point is that the blockade is not just to safeguard Israel from Hamas, but it is intentionally to lower the quality of life for Palestinians, like preventing chocolate and medicine from getting in. That's one measure that contributes to this notion of, as Aaron says, mowing the grass. And he mentioned the breaking the silence reports. Another thing Aaron mentioned is that they're intending to make Gaza uninhabitable. So how do you respond to all of that? Do you agree or disagree with that general characterization?
So let's start with the blockade. Look, I've heard and I've seen and I've read a lot of claims about how the blockade was actually meant to put the Palestinians on a diet, how you count calories, to have them just above starvation. I know I've read and heard all of these theories. I've also heard some debunkings of these theories. So I'm not really going to argue, because if I were to say, well, I have this historian here and he says it's not true, and then he says, well, I have this guy, Norman Finkelstein or whoever, and he says that it is true, and then we can, fight over facts that none of us are historians, and I don't want to nitpick, so I can speak more broadly on the issue. Essentially, once Hamas took power, won the election in the Gaza Strip, what that means essentially is that an organization that is at war with Israel and with Egypt, both of the sovereign states that are bordering the Gaza Strip, is essentially now in control of the place. And since this organization states will benefit from destabilizing Egypt and from attacking and harming Israel, both countries laid a blockade and basically took charge of, well, what do we need to keep these people alive on one hand, but weak on the other. And yes, it might be true that Israel could have added some bouquets of flowers into every delivery that came into Gaza, but normally I don't think Israel is uniquely evil or in any way special in the way that it treats its enemies. Actually, I think one could make a case that there has never been two such opposing combatants in which one side has took so much responsibility for the lives of the civilians of the other side. I don't know where this has ever happened other than in several instances of civil wars, let's say. So that's about the blockade. Your other point was about treating Gaza and making it uninhabitable. I agree. It is also my assessment that at the beginning of the war, the objective was to dilute the population of the Gaza Strip, and I don't mean that by genocide. I mean that by having them leave, essentially, have countries receive them. That diplomatic effort has failed. And now what we're left with is, well, I'm not entirely sure what the end game with Gaza is. I guess it should be some sort of maybe Gulf states involvement in Gaza. But I do agree, probably. I do have a hunch that Israel is there is a doctrine in the IDF. It's called the Dahia doctrine. It means that when a hostile terrorist organization targets Israel, the IDF, other than harming that organization, it should make the country pay. The country that did this should pay. It's called after the Dahia district in Beirut, because in the 2006 war, the IDF destroyed much of this area of the city. So well, it's a war. You started it. Now you're going to pay. So I'm not sure it's entirely a bad military decision. Like you could argue that it's not nice to do that, but then again, I don't think that Israel is fighting enemies who are, let's put it this way, the norms of warfare have essentially been established after the Second World War to prevent war from being waged in the same horrific manner that the Nazis have waged it. But the culture, the European culture, is so different, so vastly different than the Islamic culture of the Middle East, that no one in a million years imagined that a country would use the laws of war as a weapon of war. And I believe that this is, to a great extent, also what is happening in Gaza. I guess it makes sense, right? Because Israel has the might and the weapons, and the Palestinians have their belief in paradise and essentially the laws of war, and those two can be used as very effective weapons against Israel in the long run.
Aaron, your thoughts?
So there was a lot of points there. I can either address I can try to address all of them, or go through specifically.
Yeah, the theme here is, are Israel's actions, as Doron would say, necessary and appropriate for Israel's self-defense, or are Israel's actions intentionally harming Palestinians? Are they going above and beyond what's necessary for self-defense?
These
and
two are not
intentionally-
exclusionary.
No, actually, I was going to say the same thing. I think the methods Israel has used are highly, are very rational. I don't think they're crazy. He said, I think Israel is some unique evil. I don't think so. I think this is standard. This is like basically standard American practice, imperial. When you're fighting, the way Israel fights is kind of rather similar to how America fought in Iraq, and definitely how America fought in like Vietnam. What? Yes.
Aaron, what hegemon has ever fought in a, like, this ideal version of fighting that you have in your head? What hegemon historically has ever done this?
I mean, when America fought.
Never mind Vietnam. America for a second.
No.
Never mind.
No.
Okay.
Let me answer the question. Nation states, militaries, governments, power centers do not have morals, okay, as a default. They do not want or choose to follow the laws of war. What the laws of war exist is it allows us to compare behavior to how they act and see how we can morally judge them. Otherwise, we're no better off than, as you said, the Nazis of World War II, who would, who fought when they had a partisan attack, they would, if a partisan killed a German soldier, they would line up 100 locals and shoot them all, right? Like that was, so I think any government has the capacity to act like that. It is our job as citizens, your job as citizens of Israel, and my job as a citizen of the United States, to hold our governments to moral norms. And I think the default is, again and again and again, the problem with Israel isn't just how it's fighting. Again and again, it has chosen to pursue solely military means versus diplomatic means. Israel, this doctrine was articulated in a 1956 speech by Moshe Dayan, when he talked about Israel, basically living by the sword.
The Gates of Gaza speech. Yeah.
The Gates of Gaza. It's a famous speech. The Gates of Gaza speech. Living by the sword. And the Dahiyya doctrine, which Doron talked about, it's not a new doctrine for Israel at all. I mean, it's not really all that different from when a guerrilla attacked Israel in the 1950s or 60s. They would go in and they would do reprisal. They wouldn't attack. They wouldn't know where the guerrilla was. They would just destroy houses. And Israel had, during the first Intifada, it had house demolition as a legal form, and even continuing as a legal form of punishment. That if we consider someone to be a terrorist or suspected terrorist, we are allowed to demolish their house. That has always been, and when Israel invaded Lebanon, the same. So it's not a new thing. What I would say, though, is if that's going to be the strategy that Israel uses, I don't want to hear about the most moral army in the world. I don't want to hear about their terrorist organization. Therefore, we have to use it, right? Hamas can make this exact same argument. In fact, they do make that same exact argument, right? So if Hamas is a terrorist organization because they target civilians, then the IDF would have to be a terrorist organization because they target civilians. You can't have it both ways.
Actually, I think me and Aaron don't disagree on a lot of things, but we do disagree on one thing that is core. Okay, so I believe that I've spotted our disagreement, Aaron. We don't disagree on the let's say historical facts so much. We might interpret them differently, but I don't suppose any of us would be willing to die on the fence for it. What we do disagree on is, okay, let me ask you another thing. I'll ask you this differently. entertain me for a minute. Imagine that it is true that Israel is surrounded by people who would very much like to destroy it, and that concessions would indeed be mortally dangerous to the Jewish state. Imagine that this is true, okay? Imagine that it is true that if Israel were not to exact a high toll in Gaza, imagine that it is true that it would in some sense make future attacks against it more likely. Imagine that it is true that if Israel were to say, listen, I'm pulling back 67 lines, tomorrow you get a Palestinian state, imagine that this would lead to a hostile state on the borders of Israel, on the hills of Judea and Samaria, with their tanks and airplanes aimed at Israel. If all this were true, would you say that Israel is justified in doing what it is doing?
To be honest, I don't really care to entertain the scenario because it's not accurate. It doesn't.
So that's the disagreement. See,
no, it doesn't accurately reflect the historical record. This has been very dead set in the beginning of Israeli military doctrine, where the core is Ben-Gurion says basically that the Arab world is never going to be able to accept us. Therefore, we need to have extreme military superiority, have an ability to fight extremely quick, devastating wars, and have a situation where not only are we the most powerful, but no one even comes close, right? We see this right now in Lebanon, which we can talk about later. But it's not that Hezbollah is more powerful than Israel, but the fact that it can shoot rockets and didn't receive retaliation meant that Israel felt it had to take it out. This is the doctrine of Israel. It may have had some validity with the beginning of the state. When Israel was first created, it obviously was not likely that the surrounding states would accept it. Okay. And however, things changed.
How did they change?
Things changed significantly after the 1967 war. They fought, and actually, in fact, there had already been certain offers beforehand, but let's start after the 67 war, because that's when the international consensus of the two-state solution begins to develop. Israel, through the war,
Wait a second. I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm really sorry. Okay. Are you going to go through, like, I pointed at the core of our disagreement, because if you're going to go through like historical things that happened, I will not have any disagreement with you, probably.
Well, can I?
I'm sorry. Sure.
So in 1970, Egypt makes a peace offer for the Sinai. Okay? Sinai for full peace recognition. Israel says no. They don't really respond to the meeting. They're already starting to build settlements in the Sinai desert. They're building settlements in the West Bank and Gaza already. That launches the 73 war. Israel says, okay, Egypt is not to be disregarded. We will concede the Sinai to Egypt. Okay. Already in the mid-70s, okay, the PLO had been moving towards accepting the consensus of a two-state solution. There was a 1976 UN resolution,
which Israel... this is kind of cheating when you do this move, because what you're doing is you're saying, first of all, about the 73 war, most Israeli historians would agree with you, and I tend to follow their view, that it has been a mistake, that the 73 war could have been avoided due to what you've just said, okay? But the Palestinian issue is kind of different here, because what you're saying is, why did things change in 67? What has changed in 67 that could lead to the Palestinians accepting a two-state solution? Let's think about this.
Well, what changed in 67, after 67, specifically after the peace resolutions of Arab leaders, the Arab governments changed their solution to the Palestine question from the creation of one state and the removal of Israel to a two-state solution.
Wait, no, you're missing the big thing. The territorial thing is what is the main thing that changed, because Jordan and Egypt had no Jordan and Egypt would use the Palestinians, that's the Fadayan that you've mentioned before, they would use them as a pretext to destroy Israel. Okay? This is the justification for destroying Israel because we want the Palestinians.
Actually, a lot of Palestinians, historians have written about how if it was the opposite, actually. That a lot of the Egyptian government, like Nasser, was not interested in any conversation with Israel.
Yeah, that's Rashid Khalidi. Okay.
Yeah. He wanted to develop Egypt. It was the Fedayeen who had the agency, who were attacking from Gaza, who were trying to incite the Arab governments.
So no, they were trying. Well, yeah, it's true that the Arab governments had to restrain the Fedayeen from some point because of fear of Israeli reprisal, which, by the way, you said a few minutes ago were not effective, right?
I never said they weren't effective.
No, but I asked you if they were effective in protecting it. Wait, but I asked. What I asked you before is, given that this was indeed the only way. I'm not saying let's not say that it's the only way, but if it was the only way.
The point I'm making is Israel has always been more interested in expansion, okay, than in security for itself. When it conquered the West Bank and Gaza, Levi Eshkol in 1967 goes to the Knesset and basically says these places are part of Israel forever. Okay?
Yeah.
They passed under Labor government the Alon Plan, which foresaw vast parts of the West Bank, the Jordan Valley, the settlement salients, which kind of exist today, becoming permanently part of Israel. They knew they could not annex the West Bank because of international opinion, and this would have been seen as a very bad move. Better to make the occupation seem temporary. But it was considered to be basically a permanent occupation. Now, listen, I know we might say, oh, they withdrew from Gaza.
No, I wasn't going to say that.
Certain things. They were always willing to give up parts of the West Bank, many parts of it, particularly the parts where most of the Palestinians live. But for a variety of reasons, some of which ideological about the fulfillment of Zionism, and some of them very concrete economical. The fact that after 1967 war, about 1/3 of Israel's water came from the West Bank, and other reasons, in other economic reasons, Israel opted to maintain, even though it harmed its security to continue the occupation, to maintain control over the West Bank. And you don't build settlements in places that you intend to give up. And there wasn't.
Why are you raising your eyebrow, Doran? Where do you disagree?
Well, I think the whole framing is kind of weird. Well, first of all, Aaron has some good points. He's well read. I can tell that you've read the 100 Years of War in Palestine, bringing up a lot of points that Rashid Khalidi makes in that book. But I think he's missing some core issues. First of all, I've asked Aaron before, like, let's imagine that his initial assumption is wrong. What would he think? And his answer was, it's not wrong. But now I'm gonna make a gesture and do the opposite. Imagine that if I imagine that Aaron's initial supposition is correct, okay? Let's say that I accept that it is true that Israel would be more safe if it were never to have gone to, I don't know, whatever wars he deems unnecessary and stuff like that. Then my answer would be, I support his point of view. If I believe that this is correct, I agree with Aaron. But his response to me was, it's not correct. So that's the first thing.
That sounds like the crux of it.
That's why but that, to me, it seems like the pivotal point. You know? Like, I want to argue, if you would agree if that point's correct, I'm very strongly, it's very clear, in the mid-1980s, okay, in 1988 specific, the PLO officially adopted a two-state solution.
Wait, no, but look, your timeline, the timeline that you're giving, you're missing a huge part of it. You're looking like you're only looking at the Rashid Khalidi's narrative, essentially, because in 1967 you okay. So why is suddenly a two-state solution okay? Why? because what essentially has been a land grab in 48 by the Arab states, which were essentially, it's true what you said, Nasser was not always so friendly to the Palestinians. The Arab leadership in general has kind of abandoned them also in their narrative, because they were trying to essentially, instead of freeing Palestine, quote unquote, the Jordanians were trying to grab the West Bank. They even had secret collusions with the Israelis. The Egyptians were trying to grab as much territory as possible, and they grabbed Gaza. The Assyrians were trying to grab the Galilee, whatever, each for his own. And then in 67, what changed? In 67, suddenly, most Palestinians came under the control of the Israelis, as opposed to being split between the Jordanians and the Egyptians. So now it's okay to have a two-state solution, because now they're no longer my problem. So I can use them. Now it's okay to accept a two-state solution. And now we can pressure Arafat to accept a two-state solution, because it no longer comes out of our pocket. Like, when I say pocket, I mean like territory. Okay, so it's kind of a big thing that you're missing there. And also, again, in the 80s, why would Arafat accept? Because he was kicked out of, it's the Lebanon war, essentially, and the PLO was just kicked out of Jordan. Well, not just, but like 10 years before that. But you wouldn't mention that because it doesn't take center stage in Khalidi's book.
Okay, wait. I don't fully understand. You're basically saying that, they want a two-state solution, but only once Israel takes more territory. Is that what you're saying?
No, that wasn't what I said. Although you could, it's part true. It's part true. It's not takes more territory. It's wins, right? I want to negotiate once you've won.
Once Israel wins,
yeah,
they don't.
But it wasn't the main point. The main point was that the pressure on the Palestinian government to accept a two-state solution, or the diplomatic reality has changed, because it no longer concerns the Egyptian internal issue, because Gaza is no longer part of Egypt and the West Bank is no longer a part of Jordan. So now it's okay to push for Palestinian statehood more than just to push for the elimination of Israel. It's no longer just a land grab. Us Arab states, we've given up on the land grab, but we can still hurt Israel diplomatically by backing a two-state solution. And the PLO essentially recognizing that, seeing that it has better chances of achieving this two-state solution, because now they have the backing of the Arab countries. Now they can push for the two-state solution as well. So that seems like they're being more conciliatory, right? But
they're not pushing for a two-state solution to punish Israel diplomatically. They're pushing for it because they want a Palestinian state. That is
no.
And by the way, 1988.
Why don't you?
Yes, Arafat is in. Yes, Arafat is in Algeria, or is in Tunisia. But 1988 is the height of Palestinian negotiating strength. It is the height of the first Intifada. They feel like they have the most credibility on the world stage. And what do they ask for? Do they say, we're most powerful? Let's ask for our biggest man? No. They ask for the two-state solution. They say this officially, and they do accept it in reality, and it's accepted by pretty much every Arab country in the Middle East, right? And they all recognizing Israel with secure and secure borders. And actually, here's something. If their goal was to say accept a two-state solution, and then use that two-state solution to fight a war on Israel, right? If that's their goal, why would they care so much about the precise territorial concessions? Why would they need the exact 67 borders? Wouldn't it be enough to just have Jericho and you could launch rockets from there? And
right, so I'm going to move back to the move that I've made before, and I'm going to start with myself this time. Our disagreement is not on the historical fact. Our disagreement is on what would have happened. Okay, so if I let's imagine that I can read everyone's minds and I can see the future and I can see alternate timelines and stuff like that. If I were to believe that the negotiating in the 80s and maybe a two-state solution instead of Oslo, even before Oslo, okay, two-state solutions, if that would create two nations peacefully living side by side and security for Israel and good lives for the Palestinians. Would I want there to be a two-state solution, even in the 80s in that case? My answer is yes. Okay. The issue is, I do not believe that it would lead to two countries securely living side by side. And my question to you is, again, if you were to have like this alternate timeline knowledge, and you were like had some godly premonition, and you would know that this would not lead to secure two states and to a secure Israel, and that this would actually be a huge mistake by Israel security-wise, would you still want there to be a two-state solution?
You can't know the future.
Okay. That's not my no.
I'm going to finish. I'm going to make my point.
Yeah.
You can't know what would happen in any reality. Okay. Israel is the strongest military in the Middle East, one of the most powerful militaries in the entire world, backed by the world superpower. The Palestinians are completely destitute. Okay. Have basically no military, so to speak of. Completely, and we're expected to think that the security risk is not to the Palestinians, who have been attacked by Israel for the last 75 years, constantly, not ending any day. Palestinians are killed every single moment, all the time, and their lives don't matter. The security risk isn't to Palestine, which has no military to defend themselves. It's to Israel, which has a massive military, and many Israeli generals, Shin Bet chiefs, have over the years said they think Israel will be more secure with the two-state solution. It is a very common opinion among many people who in the security establishment. So they agree with me. And it makes a lot of sense.
Many people agree with you, but that's not the question I asked. Again, once again, for the second time in this conversation,
security to give people their rights.
For the second time in the conversation, I said, let's imagine I'm wrong. Would I agree with you? I said, yes. Let's imagine you're wrong. Would you agree with me? You say, I'm not wrong. That's the second time that this has happened.
Well, I think it's an important point. He thinks it's not a fair hypothetical because it's not, it's not rational.
Well, I disagree.
Would you be in favor of, it's like, would you be in favor of attack on Gaza if Iran immediately developed nuclear weapons and then nukes Israel? It's like, I wouldn't be in favor of that.
No, I will not be in favor of that.
But you would say it's not going to happen.
No, I can. It's a thing about the human mind. You can make like a thought experiment, and then you can answer. Like, if I were to offer you a burger right now, would you like a burger? It's a perfectly reasonable question. You know, you can say, well, you can't offer me a burger. Yes, but if I were to offer you a burger, would you like a burger?
So, would I be in favor of a two-state solution? I think the two-state solution is Palestinians' rights by law, by basic morality. It's not, to be honest, I don't really think it's a fair solution to the Palestinians. To be honest, it provides them no compensation. It provides them no right to return to their homes, which is the right under international law. It provides them, it doesn't provide them, it keeps them in complete destitution. Their economy is still devastated. They'll basically be a dependency upon the Israeli economy. They're not going to be fully economically.
Yeah, Doran, I feel like you keep coming back to the hypothetical question. So why don't we just drill into that? I think what you're saying is that you guys agree a lot on the historical events, but Doran, your viewpoint is, and don't let me mess this up, it's that, fundamentally Israel is and has been under existential threat. And I think the hypothetical you're posing is, what if it were the case that for Israel to have made these concessions, they're putting themselves in existential. Is that the what? Let's deal.
Yeah, because what I'm seeing is that essentially I do believe that Israel is existentially threatened, and I also believe that states need to take care of themselves to a certain degree. But I believe I do see that Aaron, our main disagreement is that Aaron, first of all, he does not believe that Israel is or was for the last couple of tens of years existentially threatened. So what I'm trying to do is to bring the debate to, well, he can do the hypotheticals to me. Like if I were to think,
hypothetical for you,
sure.
Would it be right to end apartheid in South Africa if all the blacks turn and kill the whites?
No.
Would it be right to end slavery in the U.S. if all the slaves rise up and kill all the slaves, it's just absurd hypotheticals. It's like you can justify
Why? I
anything.
answered the question. Why, Jake?
understand.
Wait. I want to make that.
Why is it
Jake,
absurd?
yeah,
But let's
Jake, can I
answer
ask you? Ask Jake the question, the same question that you've asked me. Let's see if he has an answer for it.
Well, actually,
Seriously.
would it be right to? I have another one. Would it be right to do the Holocaust if all the Jews are going to kill all the Germans?
That's a great question. Actually, you would have so you could debate that. You could debate that because if it were true that it's either kill or be killed, well, is it right to shoot a person if he's aiming a gun at you? Okay. But you can argue about the Holocaust, about taking everyone into gas chambers and industrializing it. Yeah, that's another issue. But would it be okay to defend yourself against the people who are trying to destroy you? It might have been.
Let's not go down a
It's
tangent
what
here.
the Germans said. They said we need to defend ourselves from the Jews.
You're right. I know.
Let me step in here because we're going on a side. We're going on a sidetrack. So Doran, let's just make your hypothetical just take a stance on it. So clearly you're posing the hypothetical because that's your viewpoint. So rather than posing it as a hypothetical, could you help us by just reframing it as your legitimate, rather than saying what if this, what if that, let me ask you this, let me ask you that, stop asking questions and just say what your particular view is, which I would imagine would be a version of that hypothetical in a more factual form. So could you please for us just state that hypothetical in terms of what your viewpoint is?
I don't like this historical deep dive that Aaron did. It's cool, but I don't think it's the place to do it. I can talk about today. I do believe actually that Israel is existentially threatened. I think a country is meant to last not for 20 or 30 years, but for generations, hundreds of years, hopefully. And I do think Israel is existentially threatened. It's true that Israel is a military hegemon, but it has several key weaknesses that could be used to basically topple Israel as a political identity within a couple of weeks. And I think October 7th, in a sense, has been a curse and a blessing, because it's been a blessing because I believe, and I think many in the Israeli intelligence believe, that there has been a plan to launch a surprise attack against Israel. It wouldn't be that far-fetched to imagine a scenario in which it is overwhelmed within a day before it can call up its reserves. And essentially, you go into the Knesset, which is the parliament, you pull out of there whoever you need to pull out of there. You go into the police stations, you take care of that. You go into some certain key bases, and basically you've got the whole country. Just do what Hamas did in the Gaza envelope on the entire country. You could potentially achieve this with a combined attack by Hamas, Hezbollah, some of the Jordanian proxies that the Iranians are building, and also, of course, the Syrian militias and the Iraqi militias that could all somehow invade at the same time. So this could happen. Now, not so much, because Hamas is being destroyed, and we don't know what the post-war arrangement will be. So this is why I've said it's a blessing in a sense. But yes, I do believe that Israel is existentially threatened.
And has been is the point. I mean, so that's the crux of this, guys.
There have been some parts of history where I think the main Israeli narrative would be that it has been existentially threatened, but the truth is probably that it wasn't. For example, Aaron gave the example of the early 70s. I would agree with Aaron that Israel could have avoided the 73 war probably, and that also the 73 war, many Israelis see it as at that time in which Israel was almost destroyed, but the historical facts and the military movements, probably Israel would probably have not been destroyed. Sadat would have just taken back the Sinai, and he was not even going to take back the entire Sinai. He was just going to take the other side of the Suez Canal and hold out. Never mind, it's another discussion. So yes, I do agree. Israel was not always existentially threatened in the micro level, but on the macro level, it has been. Yeah.
Let me reframe that just for the sake of just compression here. So the hypothetical that you had originally posed, reframed into your, how you actually feel, is that Israel on a macro level has, for its existence, more or less always been existentially threatened, and therefore you view their actions through that lens, which justify
to varying degrees.
to varying degrees.
Now, I just want to add one thing. Okay, I do believe actually that our main differences is I don't think Israel would be secure with a two-state solution. I think that there was no point in history in which a two-state solution would have made Israel anything other than extremely existentially threatened. And this, I think, is where my main disagreement with Aaron is. However, I am willing to concede that if I am wrong on this, then I have no problem with the two-state solution.
So, Aaron, Doron believes that Israel has, generally speaking, always been under existential threat from its neighbors. Why do you disagree with what he said?
I just want to first say there is a country and a people that is not just hypothetically under threat, that is not just in word, but in deed actively being destroyed. And that is the Palestinians and Palestine. I mean, Gaza has been pretty much destroyed. The West Bank, which is already miserable enough, has been terrorized during this current this recent war by settlers and by the army, which has destroyed all the roads in Jenin and Tulkarm. And when Israel fully invades Lebanon and says there's a war with Iran, there's a very high likelihood of some sort of mass ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, which has been talked about by groups within Israeli society for a very long time. So it to me just feels totally absurd to say these people who under basic UN under the UN under any kind of common sense morality, they have the right to self-determination. If Israel has the right to exist, then so does Palestine. And the fact is, you can't hold a people under occupation, be basically, killing them for 75 years and say, you can get your state when we feel every single one of our security concerns are addressed. No, your security concerns will not all be addressed, and they don't have to be, okay? And I think Israel, in this current situation, is there an existential threat? Maybe, but to the extent that it exists, it has been the creation of Israeli policy. Let's take Hezbollah. Hezbollah was founded in 1982. It was the reaction to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. There would be no threat from Hezbollah if Israel had not invaded Lebanon in 1982 and then occupied that country until 2000, right? That was why Hezbollah exists. So over and over again, Hamas also is a creation of the occupation. It arose during the first Intifada, and it is a kind of, in a real way, it's a creation of the Oslo Accords. When the main Palestinian National Organization was recruited to basically be collaborators in the occupation, Hamas was the alternative, the radical Islamic movement that said, we reject the Oslo Accords. They're just a sham designed to ensure permanent occupation. And they were right. The Oslo Accords, I mean, often the situation in Israel is analogized to apartheid, but it's really different and much worse than apartheid. I mean, in apartheid, you can go back and listen to the speeches of Mandela. He talks about we need to improve. There's unequal education between blacks and whites. There's unequal roads. It's like that is like unequal education. There are no universities in Gaza. Most schools have been destroyed. There's a mass starvation. You never had South Africa annihilating entire black populations.
You never had black populations attempting to destroy South Africa.
Actually, they succeeded in destroying South Africa. They destroyed the white South African state. So that was what the AMC.
No, they wanted to be equal citizens in South Africa.
That has been position of many Palestinian groups who are considered more extreme than the Palestinian, than the PLO, right? That has been the position of, say, the PFLP, the PLO for large parts of their existence. Hamas has, at various times said we want a equal to one state solution. Even Hezbollah Nasrallah has said officially that his proposed solution is an equal binational state.
He's also said that his dream image for the end of the Zionist entity is people with baggage fleeing over the Egyptian border and filling the airports. So
Yeah,
I guess he
not saying
didn't mean
he's.
the Arabs when he said that.
I'm not saying he hasn't said that too. But when you like take Nasrallah personally, he has many members of his family. Before he was killed, many members of his family were killed by Israel. Of course, he's going to hate Israel. In Gaza, if you would see anyone anyone from Gaza or even Palestinians,
Aaron, I can actually stop you there and say that I completely agree with you that one way of resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is to abolish the state of Israel. I completely agree. That's one way. But Israel is a state which should not shoot itself in the head. No state does that.
I agree. That's why I'm saying if Israel doesn't want to be destroyed, the simple way would have been to accept the two-state solution. It's supported by pretty much every single government on earth, except the U.S., which has blocked it, which has used its ability at the UN and its military support to Israel to prevent the implementation of the two-state solution. It was very much and right after the 1967 war, it was stated by the UN, you do not have the right to conquer territory by force. It's the second principle of the UN Charter.
What do you think about that,
can't
Doran?
conquer territory by force. Israel has
There's a
not
lot-
only conquered those territories, it has officially annexed the Golan and East Jerusalem, and it has been integrating and unofficially annexed large parts of the West Bank, and has had the West Bank and Gaza under occupation for over 50 years.
A lot of points made there. I want to summarize a bit. I mean, I think the crux, what Aaron is saying is that Israel has taken measures for security that have gone beyond what's reasonable.
No, they have not been for
Mhm.
security. They have been for, as Moshe Dayan said, I would rather have Sharm el-Sheikh without peace than peace without Sharm el-Sheikh. And that has been the Israeli principle for a long time. They want to control all the area between the river and the sea.
Doran,
And-
your thoughts. Aaron shared a lot. I want to hear your response.
Yeah, I just think that sovereign nations have a right to look out for themselves and defend their identities. I don't see, I don't see for Aaron. He said, well, but there's another people who have been, existentially threatened. The Palestinians, Palestine as a state was actually destroyed. Aaron knows better than that. He knows that there was no such thing. But you get my point. But
well, why hasn't it been such a thing though? Right?
Because they lost. They lost in 1948. Oh wait, no. Even if they would have won, there would still not have been a Palestine. It would have just been divided between Egypt and Jordan.
I do not think that whatever. That's a historical counterfactual. But while it was, I mean, they lost. I mean, they were the native population obviously rejected partitioning of their country, like anyone would. Like I would reject if a group came to America and said the land you live in belongs to me and you need to either live in my state or get out. And they rejected it, and then Israel kicked out.
And they lost, and there was a war. And if they would have won, probably there was a Nakba for the Jews.
And you know what? They did lose, and they accepted the two-state solution. But Israel kept saying,
"Yeah, but okay." But what you're doing here is, you're doing like that they accepted. Of course, you're going to accept it if you lose.
That is the concession, though, right?
No, it's
and
not.
It is their entire right by international law.
Okay, let's flip the situation upside down for a second. Let's say the Jews lost. Okay, and then the Jews would come after 30 years. Okay, we accept a two-state solution. What do you think about that? Well, I guess I already know, right? They were the natives and stuff like that.
If what had happened, if what has been happening to the Palestinians happened to Jews, if there was 5 million Jews under military occupation, if there was, I don't think we'd have any problem seeing the situation. The Jews, of course, would be entitled to self-determination under the UN.
No,
under the UN declaration.
I think that I disagree. I don't think that would have ever happened. But I also don't think that the issue would have dragged on for so long, because I think because there would be no neighboring countries to back the claims of the Jews, that basically there would be no real negotiating force behind the two-state solution. I think it's quite naive to think otherwise.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think you would have a situation where you have, especially considering the Palestinians are the majority of the population, if you include the refugees, I
Yeah,
don't
but
think
that's unfair to
Do,
that's an
do,
unfair
can we
move.
do we have to use hypotheticals? I mean, Doran, you have very strongly held convictions. Let's work off
I
of
actually
those.
don't have such strongly held convictions, but I
No?
think that the hypotheticals here are key because what we're doing here is speaking in hypotheticals. Aaron has been speaking in hypotheticals from the very beginning when he's been saying, well, that would have happened if they would do this and they would do this. And what I'm actually trying to establish is you don't know that. So stop acting like you do.
this happens whenever I talk like to Israelis. It always becomes like, oh, let's deal with this like abstract philosophy seminar versus actually dealing with the actions which are very real, which are happening, and which, if we actually discuss, they're pretty ugly. And so instead of talking about how Israel maintains a permanent occupation of the West Bank, we talk about oh um oh, what if Israel is attacked? What if Israel
But
suffers?
what should Israel's considerations be? Should Israel's consideration be how nice is it being in the West Bank, or what if we're attacked? What should Israel's considerations be?
Okay, as long as Israel is completely supported by the United States, Israel will be able to be free to do whatever it wants. It'll be free to cleanse the West Bank. It's free to attack Lebanon and Iran. Okay, so the critical question is, what will America do? Which is, as an American, what I'm personally responsible for. So,
Mhm.
to be honest, I say Israel, okay, you do what you will for your security. America will not be complicit in whatever actions you're doing that you deem necessary.
That's a great point. That may happen in the future. So but that actually just makes it so that it would even be a dumber idea for Israel to accept a two-state solution, because in a generation or two, the American public opinion could do a complete 180, and then Israel would be exposed to the mercies of the surrounding Arab forces, of which, by the way, Egypt, for example, if Egypt were not supported so strongly by the US, I don't know if it would maintain its agreements with Israel.
The grievances with Israel are not because of the fact that they're Jewish. It is because of the actions that the state of Israel has done to the Palestinians and to the surrounding Arab populations. It is because of that violence that governments have. Trust me, the leaders of Jordan and of Syria and actually of Egypt would be extremely happy if Israel settled for a two-state solution.
Yes, because it
they
would
wouldn't
weaken
have to deal
Israel.
with their own population, upset at them about it. They do not want war with Israel, and considering what Israel has done and the fact they haven't gone to war, shows very clear. Israel would be able to be so much better focused on defense if, instead of having its army patrolling the streets of Hebron and surrounding Gaza, they can be like a standard military. And
No, that's a weak argument. You should use others. The one about defense is kind of weak, because if you were to have a two-state solution, you could get to the Israeli population centers within 10 minutes if you were to want to attack it. So try to.
So one thing I want to come back to is that what Aaron said about, he said sometimes when I talk to people, they're dealing with these what ifs and what if this, but what Aaron's saying is, but the reality is that Israel has been doing these things in Gaza, and Aaron detailed it. So how do you respond to what Aaron's point is about, here is the reality. We don't have to work with hypotheticals. What's going on now is wrong, right?
Aaron? So there's 2 points. There's actually 2 points here. First of all, if you're talking about policy, the goal of policy is to maintain, like, set a course for the future. So you have to be philosophical about it and speak in speculations. So that's number one.
Sure, that's fine. But
number
two, just deal with what his point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So number two, about what's happening right now. I do agree. If I were a Palestinian, my interest would be to obliterate the state of Israel and kick all the Jews out, essentially. But I'm not a Palestinian. I'm an Israeli. And I think that the Israelis, the people who are in charge of the security and prosperity of the state of Israel, should be thinking of that, and not of, well, these guys are suffering so much, maybe we should, belly flop and, let them kill us or something. But also, by the way, I just want to point out, I would be very happy for the Palestinians to lead good lives and peaceful lives. And by the way, if there was an option for a two-state solution to have all the Jewish settlements in them, like take the West Bank with all the Jewish settlers, and everyone could live happily in peace, I would be very happy to have that. But for some reason, any proposed Palestinian states has to be Jew-free.
The settlers never agreed. There's never been a proposal. The Palestinians have always said they're happy to have the settlements in the state. The settlers do not want to live in a Palestinian state, and I think.
Right. So I've never heard of that, but I'm not going to say that you're wrong because I don't know enough. I might have missed something.
But how do you? So, Doran, what do you say to Aaron's point about, hey, we can, and by the way, yeah, I think you have a point. Like, it's fair sometimes to use hypotheticals, but Aaron's point is that hypotheticals might be useful, but let's not forget the reality of what's happening now. Like,
Sure.
we can talk about whether Israel could be existentially threatened, but what about the fact that
but you have to have
been killed in such large numbers,
right? But you have to have hypotheticals, because when you're saying, well, but look at what's happening right now. Let's put it this way.
But let's
wait.
But I'm saying respond to what he said, though. Like, just respond to his statements.
No, because I want to do something else. Okay, imagine you're a Russian living 100 years, a little over 100 years ago, before the Bolshevik Revolution, right? Mm-hmm. And you're saying, well, right now, something is happening right now. I have these things with all these bloody capitalists who are basically making us all slaves, blah 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 blah. But then someone from the future were to come to you and you were to say, yeah, but this is actually not a good idea, because you're going to get rid of the capitalist, or you're going to have the communist, and basically it's going to be a disaster for your country. And you will answer, yeah, but let's focus on what's happening right now. Who cares about the hypotheticals? It's kind of nonsensical to do that. And also, I hate the fact that people are suffering. I don't want anyone to suffer. But so that's basically
kind of hypotheticals. But isn't it also a fair ask for me to say, can you respond to what he said, and then we can deal with your hypotheticals as well.
Didn't I though? Okay, so can you say again what you want me to respond to exactly?
Yeah, Aaron, can you restate kind of the reality of the situation that was your.
Right now in Gaza, there is a population, more than half of whom are children, many of whom are starving. They lack access to medicine. Hospitals have been destroyed. Most residential areas have been destroyed. There are no universities. People are attacked day after day. Another attack on a school, on a hospital. The war continues, and now the war. And that is a war on a civilian population, which is basically defenseless. Now, we can just say, and maybe if you want to just come out and say it, like, I don't care about the morality. We're just going to do a security interest. Let's just come out and say, like, we're Nazis. We don't care about human lives, or right. We're just going to be all realpolitik and all of this. And if you want to say that, come out, fine. Because
no, I don't want to say that.
Okay, because you could there could be a situation where Israel feels like its security the only solution to security is to kill all the Palestinians, right? In your mind, would that be justified?
I don't think. If such a situation were to happen, then yes. However, I don't think it could happen. Well, let's imagine that like a fantasy world in which every Palestinian has like a button on him that kills Jews when he presses them, and the only way to stop him is to kill him. Yes, he would be justified in killing all Palestinians.
Okay. Well, that's how I feel about your hypotheticals.
No, but it's a fair question. What's not fair about answering that question?
Because that is how these genocides are justified.
Yeah, but right? I didn't say that. I didn't say that I believe you should do that.
And in the Torah, it talks about, Paro says we need to the Jews are going to rise up against us. We need to kill them before they kill us.
Yeah, that's not what the Nazis said too. But I'm not saying, people can think things. What do you want me to do about it?
Well, why is it okay, Doran? And what Israel's doing in Gaza? How do you justify it?
Okay, so what? Here's the thing. Okay, it's not okay, but basically what's happened is that the governing body of Gaza has delegated responsibility of its civilian population to Israel because it knows that it makes things more difficult for Israel. It's part of the strategy. So on one hand, I don't want this responsibility. But on the other hand, I have this responsibility. So you have like this sort of mix in which, it's really not clear.
What
But
do you
I
mean
don't.
it's part of its strategy? What do you mean by that?
I think it's part of Hamas's strategy to have Israel. Okay, I don't want to say human shield because it's been done to death, but there is significant interest on Hamas's part to make lives miserable for the Palestinians in Gaza, and to make it basically Israel's responsibility to take care of them.
What's interesting about that? I think that's completely false. And for the main reason why, if it's Hamas' interest to make the lives of Palestinians worse, why does Israel think if it makes the Palestinians' life worse, they will overthrow Hamas? It seems like it's in Israel's interest too, right?
It could be, and so the Palestinians are the the ultimate victims in Gaza, which in a certain sense they are.
Why would the Palestinians support Hamas if their goal was to make their lives worse?
No, I didn't say it was their goal. I said it was their interest currently.
Because the main. Sorry, this is a really common talking point, and I think what it misses is the fact that Hamas is not really dependent on very many outside actors. Okay, it's a very isolated organization from the world. The main people it depends upon for its soldiers, for its food, for everything, is Palestinians. It needs to have Palestinian support.
Yeah.
And if Hamas was purposely hiding in hospitals to get Israel to bomb the hospitals, if they were
No, that's not what I said.
okay, and what are they doing?
I don't know what they're doing exactly, right? But it's clear that there is an interest here. First of all, it's a culture that's different from yours. It's come from a different philosophical tradition. The value of life is not as you see it. The value of life is the value of death, as long as it's in the service of the struggle. Death is actually a great thing. Okay, how do you say? I don't know. My cousin died in the bombings in Arabic. You would say, well, I don't remember how you say cousin, but you say, like ahi shahidi. Yeah, he became a shahid. He became a martyr. Okay, it's a very elevated in Islam. Well, it's political Islam. So first of all, you would have wait. You would culturally. You have to consider that it's a different culture from yours, and I think it's something that is difficult in the West to understand. So actually using this tactic is not such a bad thing, and Hamas has actually stated this over and over again, that it's willing to have many martyrs in Gaza, and it's actually serves the what you might call the Palestinian cause, because heavy casualties are bad for Israel. Heavy Palestinian casualties civilian casualties are bad for Israel.
Yeah, I mean, this is an old kind of Israeli idea of like Golda Meir, like, we hate them. The worst thing is we hate them for making us kill their children. And this ends when, Palestinian mothers love their children as much as we do.
No, more than they hate us. That's a quote.
More than they hate us. Right, that's a saying. Palestinian mothers and parents love their children just as much, exactly equal. Now, I'm not going.
It's not what I said. I didn't say that I did.
Wait. Can I finish my point? There is a culture of martyrdom in Palestine, especially. I don't really think it mainly comes from Islam, though. I think it receives an Islamic language, which is what their culture is, but it is a cultural defense mechanism. To be honest, it is a cultural defense mechanism. This was explained by a Palestinian friend of mine. He was like, Israel keeps killing Palestinians. Palestinians die. How many people do I know who have died, who have been killed? Very few. Most Palestinians have many people in their family, who have been killed by Israel over the years. It just is constant. I mean, some people have lost 35 members in this war, family members. I mean, just imagine if you lost 35 members of your own family. It is a way of the Palestinians holding on, and they've been through a kind of insane amount. They lost their whole country. They lost their homes. They ended up in refugee camps. Then those refugee camps were attacked. They found themselves under occupation, where a Palestinian could be killed by a soldier in the street and there would be no consequences. And to do that, to basically continue existing and living life, they have, in Palestinian culture, it does get you some kind of, glory to be killed by Israel. It's kind of all they have. And to be honest, we talk about martyrdom culture like it's something so abstract from us, but there was certainly a kind of martyrdom culture in Israel and in the American Jewish community around the hostages, where people knew the names of every hostage who had been killed. At dinners, there were pictures of hostages.
Yeah, but no one would say that it's glorious that they died or that they died for some purpose, important purpose. No one's going to say that.
It was a kind of remembrance and celebration. It's not really.
It's not martyrdom.
No one wants their brother or their family members to be killed or to be martyred.
I agree.
But what they do want is to feel like that person didn't die for no reason, that they died for a kind of cause, and that, I think that is relatable. How,
I also think it's relatable, but I intensely disagree with you about the leadership in Gaza, about how much this doctrine plays into Hamas worldview and how much it affects what I earlier in this conversation called lawfare instead of warfare, right? So I intensely disagree with you on that.
Well, yeah, lawfare is the term when human rights organizations and the UN tries to apply the law to Israel.
You can address the argument instead of saying, where do you know?
Well, lawfare, it was, when the Palestinians started going to international bodies.
No. What? Okay, so I will be more. I won't use the word lawfare. I'll just describe it. What I meant was the Hamas interest in maximizing civilian casualties. I said that Hamas has an interest in maximizing Palestinian civilian casualties.
If Hamas has an interest in not having civilian casualties and having civilian casualties, there's a very simple way that Israel can neutralize that threat, which is by not killing civilians.
So
right?
Give up,
and Israel still chooses. Israel still thinks that it's worth it for civilians to die. They still think it's worth it to bomb hospitals.
Sure. I think so too. No, it's not. Why are you saying carpet bomb? Do you know what carpet bombing means?
Okay, you're right. It's not exactly carpet bomb because these are precise strikes. They know where bombs go.
Yeah, but the price, what you mean is that Israel is willing to pay a price in civilian blood for that strike to go through. That's like your problem with it. Am I correct?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't see why using a tactic to sacrifice your civilian population should give you an advantage in warfare. I just don't see that.
I don't think it does. To be honest, Israel just when Putin says, if I hear Putin give a speech tomorrow night where he says, I have a warning to everyone in Ukraine. You have missiles in your kitchen and you have weapons in Ukrainian military members.
I didn't use that point. I didn't use that talking point, but I can actually use it more accurately because you're strawmanning it.
When I hear Putin say that, I think he's about to start attacking hospitals and residential homes. And that's exactly what Israel has done.
That's also what the Houthis and the Iranians are doing to Israel. They're saying, leave Tel Aviv. There's rockets coming, right?
I'm not saying they're not. Yeah,
but it's not what Israel. It's not what Israel is doing.
They're using the same tactics.
No, but there's a difference between calling a certain block or a certain area and going to the entire country and say, well, listen, you gotta leave the country, bro. We're gonna bomb you in a second.
Is that not almost exactly what happened in Gaza? In the beginning of the war, they issued evacuation orders to the entire North Gaza Strip.
Okay, let me ask you something. If you were to go fight in not northern Gaza, North Michigan, okay? You have to invade North Michigan because the Mormons are, Utah, okay? The Mormons are rebelling in Utah and you gotta invade. What is a better way to avoid civilian casualties than to tell them to evacuate from Utah? What is the better way?
I reject. First of all, I don't think these are methods designed to reduce civilian casualties.
Oh, they can do both. They can do both what you're thinking and also reduce civilian casualties.
The orders are designed to clear the civilian population. I don't. Okay, let's take a step back. I don't think that the Israeli stated war aim of destroying Hamas is a valid war aim. I don't think it's legitimate. No one takes it as legitimate to declare war and say we're gonna kill. Say we're gonna declare war on Russia declares war on Ukraine. If Russia says our goal is to kill everyone in the Ukrainian government, to remove them all, we don't say that's a valid war aim.
So
right?
would saying that destroying Hamas's political and military capabilities be a valid war aim? If I put it like that?
You have the right, countries have the right to defend themselves. They do not have the right to defend themselves with armed force before exhausting diplomatic options.
Oh, come on.
No, that is international law. And before October 7th,
but there's a problem.
That Israel had exhausted diplomatic options.
There's a problem in the definition here, because you're going to be able to endlessly argue about what does exhaust the diplomatic option mean.
Well, okay, you're right. In a hypothetical, that might be the case. In this situation, it's obvious. Hamas many times had after the conflict in 2008 and 9 and 2014 signed ceasefires with Israel, where Hamas said, we will stop shooting rockets if you lift the blockade. Israel never lifted the blockade.
Yeah, but it would have been very dangerous for Israel to lift the blockade, in my estimation.
Well, they didn't lift the blockade, and October 7th happened, right?
Okay.
It was a direct outcome.
No,
Hamas has repeatedly
I'm not
offered,
sure, actually, that it is a direct outcome.
Hamas has repeatedly offered a 30-year truce. Their 2017 charter, many leaders have come out and said, we would support a two-state solution. In their 2017 charter accepts as a worse but a possible outcome of a two-state solution. Israel, you could say, oh, they're not being in good faith. They're lying. Well, there's a way to test that. Invite them to the negotiating table, make the offer, and say, do you accept it? But no, Israel never wants to test it, not because they think Hamas will say no, because they think Hamas will say yes.
What do you
because
make
they know
of that,
Hamas will accept the two-state solution.
What do you make of that?
I don't agree with that.
Why not? But you say you don't, but why not?
I don't think. Okay, so I think Hamas is an Islamist organization that is dedicated to removing foreign influence from the Middle East, from the Dar al-Islam, what is called in Islamic jargon. And I don't think that what Aaron said is true.
But
I don't think
he's giving you fact. He's not making an opinion. He's giving you statements about historical fact.
No, it did give me opinions.
He said about the
why
peace
did
offer.
Israel?
He made a peace offer. He's giving historical events. Yeah. Why did Israel?
Why did Israel agree to negotiate with Hamas over a resolution of the conflict? They never have been willing to talk to Hamas, except unofficially for ceasefire.
Yeah, because I think reaching an agreement with Hamas on one side of the border would have been a catastrophe for Israel.
What do you mean by that? If you could,
you can't border an Islamic jihadist state that wants to destroy you, even if you shook hands.
So basically, it's the same thing again. If we think they might accept it, but they'll just use it to attack us. Basically.
Yeah.
So then you're not taking them legitimately. I guess, Doron, what Aaron's saying is, if Hamas, if this group is saying, "Hey, let's come to the table. Here's a negotiation, your proposal," and if you're saying we don't believe you, well, that's not fair. Like, you can't say we don't believe you and therefore you're not trustworthy. That doesn't make any sense. I'm
sorry if it's not fair, but I'm not willing to shoot myself in the head because someone thinks I'm not fair.
So basically,
I'm saying logically it's not fair. Like, you're logically being inconsistent, because if you're saying to someone, I'm not saying not fair morally, I'm saying logically.
I think it's logically very consistent, and this has been the policy of Israel, where basically they say, you don't want peace with us, and even if you do say or accept it officially, unofficially, you want peace with us, You will never accept it. Therefore, we can never negotiate. We can never have peace. There is no possible diplomatic solution to the conflict. Endless war. And obviously, this ends just one way. It ends with all the Palestinians no longer in the area of Palestine.
I know we have a few minutes, but I think this is a really important point, Doran, that I really want to get your feedback on. I know that you're very, very skeptical, rightfully so, of Hamas and these other groups. But what Aaron is saying is that if a party comes to the table and says, hey, here's a negotiation, here's a peace offering, whatever it is, if the receiving party says, sorry, not interested,
but
that's not a way to peace. Like,
so I agree with you, and I do think that so now what I have to do in order to be consistent is to tell you what I think would be indications of Hamas being legit when it comes to the table and offers a deal, right? But
if you're like, they never wanted to come to the table, and then they come to the table, and you say, no, we're not interested.
I wouldn't say that they would never come to the table. As I said, I would be very happy to live side by side with a peaceful, happy, prosperous Palestinian state. But
so
why don't you take them seriously if they
because I can't take an Islamist organization seriously.
So what basically by the way, this is a long time. The term for it, termed by Israeli historian, political scientist Avner Yaniv, was Palestinian peace offensives. When Palestinians became more moderate and make peace offers, this was seen as a peace offensive. That because they might seem like they're being moderate, and this was the same thing with the PLO, which was not an Islamist organization, right? We can't.
But the PLO did, I believe, did want to. Arafat was a terrorist. It did want to destroy Israel, and also the PLO is so. You've seen how little support it has compared to Hamas, and I just don't think it's a good idea to give such a hostile population a sovereign state on the mountains overlooking your most populous cities. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's a good idea. Theoretically, I accept that if peace was possible and likely, I believe that Israel should go for a two-state solution. I just don't think that peace is likely in such a scenario. And by the way, this is not me saying that rejectionism is always a smart idea on Israel's part, right? But I think so far on the Palestinian issue, it has probably been a good idea.
My final question, it feels like, Doran, what you're saying is, I just wish this group wanted peace. And then the group comes and say, hey, we want peace. And then you say, no, we don't trust you.
No. Listen, I see the problem here, but it's something that's embedded in the culture, and that right now, what I'm seeing and what other Israelis are seeing, what the culture creates and how the conversation goes in that culture, it's problematic to give them a sovereign state on your mountains.
So there's no peace. But if you're saying you're not willing to take seriously their requests for peace,
I will be willing to take it seriously, but I think there needs to be a long process that starts to happen, because I see the problem that you're pointing at. Obviously, it's a problem, but I do genuinely believe that there is a problem with this specific population. And if that were not the case, great. Like a piece of sorry.
I have nothing more to say. I think this is a good place to end it.
Okay. Thanks, guys. This is great. I hope neither of you are too frustrated. I thought this was awesome. It's too bad we have to go because I think Iran just attacked or is launching missiles at Israel.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean, geez. Is this Israel's fault, Aaron? Or
whatever. It's a whole other conversation.
All right. Okay, guys. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to end this recording.